Welcome to Sarah Wood's Tale, where stories comes alive. Please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on your notification bell for subsequent stories. The sky was an angry shade of gray, as if the heavens themselves disapproved of what was happening. The air smelled of rain, and the cool evening breeze did nothing to calm the storm raging inside Linda's heart. She sat on the worn-out wooden porch of their small house, her hands resting on her swollen belly. She was 8 months pregnant, but the weight pressing down on her chest felt heavier than the life growing inside her. Her husband, James, was leaving her. Not for another life of struggle. Not to chase a dream. But for a rich woman. Linda's fingers trembled as she wiped away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. She wanted to be strong, to hold back the emotions that were threatening to consume her, but it was impossible. How could she not cry? How could she not feel betrayed? A black luxury car purred in the driveway, a sleek, expensive machine that did not belong in their humble neighborhood. The car's engine hummed softly, almost mockingly, as if it knew its presence here meant the end of something precious. And then, James stepped out of the house. His suitcase was already packed. It had been packed for days. That was how she knew he had planned this for a long time. This was no impulsive decision. He had been ready to leave her even before she knew it. Linda's voice trembled as she finally spoke. So, this is it, James? This is how you walk away from me? From our child? James paused, his hand tightening around the handle of his suitcase. For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, regret, or was it hesitation? But it was gone just as quickly. He exhaled deeply and turned to face her, his expression cold, detached, like a man saying goodbye to a stranger, not his wife. Linda, he said, his tone carefully measured. I told you before. I can't live like this anymore. I'm tired of struggling. I'm tired of barely making ends meet. I have a chance for a better life, and I'm taking it. Linda let out a bitter laugh. A better life, she echoed. And what about me, James? What about our baby? Don't we deserve a better life too? James clenched his jaw. Vanessa can give me everything I've ever wanted. She has connections, money, power. She believes in me. She can help me build something for myself. If I stay here, I'll just be stuck, working a dead-end job, living paycheck to paycheck. Linda's chest rose and fell rapidly. The betrayal cut so deep she could barely breathe. So, you're choosing her over your family, she whispered, her voice cracking. James flinched, but he quickly recovered. I need to do what's best for me, Linda. I can't keep living for other people. Other people. Linda's voice rose, and she struggled to stand up, pressing her hand against her belly. I am not other people, James. This baby is not other people. We are your family. We are your responsibility. James ran a hand down his face, his frustration evident. Look, I'll send money. I'm not abandoning the baby. I can't stay. I deserve happiness too. Linda's hands balled into fists. And I don't, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James said nothing. The sound of heels clicking against the pavement made Linda's stomach churn. Vanessa was here. She was a tall, elegant woman, draped in expensive designer clothes, her perfectly styled hair shining under the dim evening light. Everything about her screamed wealth, from the diamond bracelet on her wrist to the smug, satisfied look on her face. James, are you ready? Vanessa's voice was smooth, like silk, but to Linda, it felt like the sharp edge of a knife. James nodded without hesitation. Yeah, I'm ready. And that was it. No lost words. No goodbye. Linda's breath hitched as she watched James walk past her, not even sparing her another glance. He picked up his suitcase and headed straight for the luxury car waiting for him. He reached for the door handle, but something stopped him. Something made him look back. Maybe it was the sound of Linda's soft, broken sobs. Maybe it was the way she clutched her stomach, whispering words she thought no one could hear. But he turned. Just for a second. Their eyes met, his filled with pain, his filled with uncertainty. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Linda finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. One day, you'll regret this, James. He didn't respond. Instead, he opened the car door and slipped inside. Vanessa smirked at Linda, a victorious glint in her eyes, before sliding into the driver's seat. The car's engine roared to life, and within seconds, they were gone. Gone. Linda's knees buckled, and she sank onto the porch, one hand supporting her belly, the other covering her mouth to muffle her sobs. The wind howled through the empty street, wrapping around her like a cold embrace. And then, through her tears, she whispered to herself, a vow, a promise, a declaration of strength. I will raise my son alone. She didn't need James. She would survive. She would fight. And one day, he would realize what he had lost. Linda's screams filled the small hospital room as she clutched the bedsheets, her body drenched in sweat. The pain of childbirth was excruciating, but the pain in her heart was far worse. James should have been here. He was supposed to be here. But instead, he was probably sipping expensive champagne somewhere with Vanessa, living the life he had chosen over his own flesh and blood. The nurse wiped Linda's forehead, offering her soft words of encouragement. Just a little more, sweetheart. You're almost there. Linda clenched her teeth, fighting through the pain, pushing with everything she had left. And then, the sharp cry of a newborn filled the room. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed back onto the pillow, exhausted, weak, but overwhelmed with emotion. It's a boy, the doctor announced with a smile, wrapping the baby in a warm blanket before gently placing him in Linda's trembling arms. Linda looked down at her son, his tiny fingers curled into a fist, his face scrunched up as he whimpered. Her heart swelled. Liam, she whispered, brushing her lips against his forehead. You are my everything now. She held him tightly, making a silent vow. She would protect him. She would raise him to be strong. And she would never, ever let him feel abandoned. The days after Liam's birth were the hardest of Linda's life. With James gone, she had no financial support, no stable income, and no one to help her. She had to return to work only weeks after giving birth, leaving Liam with a kind but aging neighbor, Mrs. Carter. Her days were long and exhausting, juggling multiple jobs just to afford food, rent, and baby supplies. In the morning, she worked as a cashier at a small grocery store, her feet aching from standing for hours. In the evenings, she cleaned offices, scrubbing floors, emptying trash cans, and wiping down desks while her back screamed in pain. And at night, when Liam cried, she rocked him back to sleep, whispering soothing words even as she fought back tears of her own. One evening, as she was walking home from work, a cold wind cut through her thin jacket. She pulled it tighter around her body, feeling the weight of exhaustion press down on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She frowned, pulling it out. It was a message from an unknown number. James, hope you're doing okay. I'll send some money soon. Linda stared at the screen, her grip tightening on the phone. This was the first time he had reached out since he left. No apology. No checking on Liam. Just a half-hearted promise to send money. Anger boiled inside her. With shaking fingers, she typed back. Linda, don't bother. We don't need your money. Liam and I will be fine without you. She hit send and shoved the phone back into her pocket, blinking back tears. She wasn't going to let James buy his way back into their lives. If he had chosen Vanessa and her riches, then he could stay there. Because she would never let her son feel like he wasn't enough. James leaned back in the soft leather seat of the private jet, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The plane hummed smoothly through the sky, taking him and Vanessa to their next destination, a luxury resort in the Maldives. He should have felt happy. This was the life he had dreamed of, wasn't it? Expensive vacations, designer clothes, 5-star hotels, parties with celebrities, everything he never had with Linda. But something gnawed at him. A strange, empty feeling in his chest. Vanessa's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. James, darling, do try to look more enthusiastic. We have a press event when we land. I don't need you looking like a lost puppy. James forced a smile. Of course, babe. Vanessa's sharp gaze lingered on him for a moment before she turned back to her phone, her manicured fingers typing away. He felt like a trophy on display. In the beginning, it had been thrilling, being introduced to powerful business people, attending glamorous parties, living in a mansion bigger than anything he had ever seen. But slowly, Vanessa's true colors began to show. It started with little things. James, wear this. The suit you picked looks cheap. James, Don't talk too much in meetings. Just let me handle things. James, sign this. It's just a prenup, nothing serious. He had signed it without thinking. Why would he question Vanessa? She was the one who had given him everything. But over time, it became more than just suggestions. It became rules. James, you don't need to visit your old neighborhood. What's there for you? James, stop talking about your past. It's embarrassing. James, you're lucky I even chose you. Don't forget that. And then, one night, he overheard her talking to a friend at a party. James? Oh, here's just my little project. A stray I picked up and polished. James' stomach dropped. Was that how she saw him? A project? A stray? He should have walked away that night. But where would he go? He had burned every bridge. He had walked out on Linda. He had abandoned his own son. He had left his old life behind, chasing a dream that now felt more like a prison. And worst of all, he knew it was too late to turn back. On one side of the city, Linda sat at the small kitchen table, helping Liam with his schoolwork. The little boy grinned up at her, proud of the words he had just written. Mom, do you think I'll be smart like you when I grow up? Linda smiled, ruffling his hair. You'll be smarter, baby. You'll be the best at whatever you choose to be. On the other side of the city, James sat alone in his massive bedroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He barely recognized himself. He had the expensive suits, the expensive watch, the expensive life. But he had lost himself. And deep down, he was starting to realize. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. The world had changed. Time had moved forward, but karma had not forgotten. Liam Anderson, now 24 years old, stood at the grand opening of his company's new headquarters. Cameras flashed around him, journalists whispered his name, and young entrepreneurs looked at him with admiration. He had built a multi-million-dollar tech empire from nothing. His mother, Linda, stood beside him, her eyes filled with pride. How does it feel to be one of the youngest tech CEOs in the country? A reporter asked, holding out a microphone. Liam smiled, his confidence radiating. It feels like hard work pays off. My mother always told me that no one owes you anything. If you want a future, you build it yourself. Linda squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the years of sacrifice and struggle. They had made it. Without James. While Liam's name was being praised in business magazines, James' name had become a joke in high society. He was no longer the charming young man Vanessa had once flaunted like a trophy. He had become a shadow of himself. Vanessa barely even acknowledged him anymore. It started subtly. Little dismissive remarks. James, why don't you go get me a drink? You're not doing anything useful anyway. James, I'm talking to important people. Try not to embarrass me. But soon, it became worse. One evening, at a high-profile party, Vanessa laughed loudly as she introduced James to a group of wealthy investors. Everyone, meet James, the man who gave up his family for me. Cute, isn't it? James' face burned with shame, but he forced a smile. He had chosen this life, hadn't he? But the final blow came a few weeks later. James had started noticing things. Vanessa was coming home later than usual. She was always on her phone, texting someone and smirking. One night, he decided to confront her. Vanessa, are you seeing someone else? His voice was quiet, controlled. But inside, he was trembling. Vanessa didn't even look up from her wine glass. She smirked. Oh, James. Do you think I have time to argue about this? You're not that important. James' stomach dropped. So, it's true. Vanessa finally looked at him, bored, annoyed. Of course, it's true. Did you really think I'd stay with you forever? You were fun for a while, but honestly, you're just sad now. James felt the room spin. She had never loved him. He had destroyed his family for a woman who saw him as nothing more than a plaything. He had lost everything for this. A week later, it was over. James came home to find his belongings in suitcases by the door. Vanessa sat on the couch, sipping wine, looking utterly unbothered. You should have seen this coming, James. This is my house. My money. You don't belong here anymore. James stared at her, disbelief clouding his mind. "You're kicking me out." Vanessa laughed. "Kicking you out sounds harsh. Let's say I'm giving you an opportunity to see what life is like without me." James felt his heart pound in his chest. He had nothing. No house. No job. No money. He had become nothing. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Not my problem." She stood up and walked past him, pausing just long enough to throw one last dagger. "You should have stayed with your little family, James. Maybe then, you wouldn't be begging at my door." Then, just like that, she was gone. James sat on a park bench that night, his head in his hands. The cold wind bit through his thin jacket, but the emptiness inside him felt even colder. He had burned every bridge. He had chosen money over love. And now, he had neither. As he scrolled through his phone, desperate for someone, anyone, to help him, his finger hovered over a familiar name. Linda. The wife he abandoned. He hesitated. Would she even pick up? Would she laugh at him? Hang up the moment she heard his voice? But what choice did he have? With a deep breath, he pressed call. James stood in front of the familiar small house, the same house he had abandoned over 2 decades ago. The sky was heavy with dark clouds, and the smell of rain filled the air. He stood there, motionless, clutching the soaked edges of his thin, wrinkled coat. His expensive suits were long gone. His perfectly styled hair was now streaked with gray. He looked nothing like the man who had once walked away from this very place, stepping into a life of luxury. He hesitated before knocking. Would Linda even listen to him? Would Liam? Taking a deep breath, he raised his fist and knocked. Once. Twice. 3 times. The door opened slightly, and Linda stood there, staring at him. She had changed. The years had made her stronger. Her posture was firm, her face calm, not the broken woman he had left behind. She was whole. James swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda. She didn't say a word. Instead, she crossed her arms and studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether he was even worth her time. The silence stretched between them, thick with years of betrayal and pain. James shifted uncomfortably. I had nowhere else to go. Linda tilted her head slightly. Is that so? Her voice was steady, but there was no warmth in it. James nodded quickly. Vanessa, she threw me out. I lost everything. Linda exhaled slowly, shaking her head. And you think that matters to me? James flinched. He had expected anger. He had expected insults. But this calm indifference. It was worse. I thought maybe you and Liam. Before he could finish, another figure appeared behind Linda. Liam. Now a grown man, successful, powerful, confident. The complete opposite of the helpless child James had abandoned. Liam's jaw tightened when he saw James. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with something James couldn't quite place. Disappointment, disgust, or worse, nothing at all. James cleared his throat. Liam, son. Liam let out a dry laugh. Don't call me that. James swallowed hard. I just wanted to see you. I wanted to. Liam's voice was cold. Why? What do you want from us now? Money? A place to stay? James shook his head frantically. No. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. And Liam took a step forward. James froze. For the first time, he realized something terrifying. This man standing before him, his own son, was more of a man than he had ever been. Liam had grown up without a father. He had faced the world without James' help. And yet, he had succeeded. James had nothing left. But Liam had everything. And he hadn't needed James to get there. Liam's voice was quiet but firm. You don't get to walk back in after all these years. You don't get to show up now, just because you have nowhere else to go. James opened his mouth, but no words came out. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. Liam sighed, running a hand through his hair. You chose your path, James. You left us. You made it clear that money was more important than family. Linda stepped closer, her eyes never leaving James. And now, you have neither. James' lips trembled. I was stupid. I was blinded by greed. I know that now. Liam's face remained unreadable. That's not enough. James blinked. What? Knowing your mistakes isn't enough, Liam said. Regret doesn't erase what you did. James' chest ached. Please. Just give me a chance. Linda's gaze softened, but only for a second. Then she stepped back inside and placed a hand on the door. James knew what was coming. Liam's voice was calm but final. Goodbye, James. And then, James stared at the wooden surface in front of him, his breathing uneven. The rain soaked through his clothes, the wind chilling him to the bone. Slowly, he stepped backward, his shoes splashing against the puddles forming beneath him. He turned away from the house, walking into the night. No home. No family. No second chance. He had spent years chasing wealth, only to realize too late that true wealth had been right in front of him all along. Inside the house, Linda and Liam stood together. For a brief moment, Linda exhaled deeply, as if releasing a ghost from the past. Liam gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Are you okay? Linda smiled softly, squeezing his hand. I am now. She pulled him into a hug. For years, she had raised Liam alone. For years, she had fought, struggled, and sacrificed. And now, they stood together, stronger, happier, and completely free. They didn't need James. They never had. And they never would. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to get more interesting stories like this.